Hey guys, this is Justin at the Survivor Review, and continue my look at the Rambo franchise. Today we'll be talking about the 20-year later fourth installment, simply titled Rambo. So this is the only installment in the franchise to actually be directed by Sylvester Stallone, and this came out kind of during Stallone's resurgence in the mid-2000s, like right after he did Rocky Balboa. Of course he wanted to bring back his other iconic character with Rambo. It came out 20 years after Rambo 3, so it's one of those kind of belated sequels that usually don't turn out so good. Usually they're just like kind of tired, or they just don't capture the tone and feel of like the previous installments. They just feel like a little too late. But like Stallone did with Rocky Balboa, this one works, and perfectly captures the tone and character of the previous films. This is a worthy sequel to the franchise, and in fact is kind of better than the other two sequels. Well, when it comes to the sequels, I still think Rambo 2 is my favorite, just because it's just purely entertaining. But if you want to talk about movies that capture the tone of First Blood and are the closest to First Blood, it's easily this movie. Because Rambo 2 and 3 kind of just delve into, cheesy 80s action, which is fun, but doesn't have the kind of serious kind of drama of the first movie. And this one kind of blends the two. It blends the serious, like, dark tone of First Blood with some of the over-the-top action of the later sequels. So this movie begins kind of like Rambo 3 does, with John Rambo just living his life in Thailand, just, working day to day, when this group of Christian missionaries come by, asking him to bring them upriver into Burma to kind of bring aid and, like, medical help to the villagers in Burma who are involved in this kind of big kind of civil war basically going on. It's just really brutal, really serious stuff. And Rambo flat out refuses. He's like, no, Burma's a war zone, you're gonna die. Like the line he has in the movie where he's just like,
are you bringing any weapons?
Of course not.
You're not changing anything.
One of the main people in the group named Sarah ends up convincing Rambo to take them upriver and bring them into there, despite his reservations to do so. He ends up doing that, and, after dropping him off, goes about his way, when, of course, while they're just in the village just treating people, it's all nice and normal, all of a sudden, boom, it gets bombed, and the place gets overrun by the soldiers, and they get taken captive. And then this priest from that church visits Rambo and basically says, hey, they got caught. You're the only person that really knows where they exactly were and where they were going. You're the only person that can really go there. So we've hired a group of mercenaries and we want you to take them upriver, basically, and show them where to go, and they're gonna go save them. So he does so, and of course he gets involved in the action and ends up going into Burma to save and rescue these people. So I'm going to mention this right off the bat, because this is the thing that most people talk about when they discuss this movie, is the violence. This movie is so brutal and so violent and just so visceral. It's probably one of the most violent movies in recent times, and that's saying something, because this movie is already a decade old and still one of the most violent and brutal action movies out there. It helps that the subject matter in this movie is super serious and super real, because this is stuff that is really going on in Burma. So you're watching this, you're like, holy crap, this stuff really happened, and so that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you flinch. Also, it never cuts away, it never, it doesn't hold back. Like, you see stuff in this movie that you don't really want to be seeing in movies. You see, like, children getting murdered and stuff like that, like, it just, in close-up, it doesn't cut away, and you're like, oh, Jesus. Like, from the opening sequence, the opening sequence of this movie is our main villain, this leader of this military group, who has his soldiers throw all these mines into this rice field, takes out all these villagers that they captured, and makes them run through the field, and to see if they can make it to the other side. And that scene is just so tense, and that's just the opening of the movie, and you're sitting there just on the edge of your seat like, oh no, just cringing at that. And then you have stuff like the blood in this movie. Okay, I will get into this a little bit. There is some bad CGI in this movie, but those moments aside, the way it handles gunshots, it's not just a simple either blood squib or nowadays just CGI blood splatter. It's just the people get ripped apart by the bullets. It seems a lot more realistic compared to a lot of action movies that just, like I said, have people get shot and that's it. This, people get shot and they fly in half, and you see bullets just rip through their legs and just rip them off basically. I don't think I've seen a movie handle the violence the way this one does. It just feels so brutal and so realistic and so just grotesque. but it's fitting for the situation, because a lot of the stuff with this movie is that like Stallone was trying to bring attention to the situation that was going on in Burma, so I think that's one of the reasons why he didn't hold back. Speaking of Stallone though, he's really good in this movie playing Rambo. He has some really good kind of like speech moments, especially like the moment, kind of like the iconic, I guess you can kind of say, line from this movie.
Live for nothing, or die for something.
It's just a really great moment of him talking to the mercenaries, being just like, you know, this is why we're here, this is what we're doing, and we're gonna do it. Doesn't matter if we want to, it's what we're gotta do. And I thought that was just a great moment. That just felt truly like Rambo. Like I was saying, like the best thing about this movie is that it feels like Rambo. It doesn't feel like Stallone kind of lost his touch. Like he still knows the character, just like with Rocky, and he does it perfectly, like to a T. So like the middle half of the movie, when he joins up with the mercenaries, it seemed weird to have a movie with Rambo being part of a team. Because usually it's just Rambo on a solo mission to do what he needs to do, you know? So it felt kind of weird to have him with the team of mercenaries. Plus, the mercenaries themselves aren't that interesting of characters. You're very typical kind of like stock mercenary characters. You got like the southern guy who's singing and stuff, and you got like the angry kind of guy who really just want to be doing this, but like he's kind of a badass. He's a hard ass type of character, you know? Like it's all your very typical stock mercenary characters, and they're very forgettable. Like I always kind of forget about them until I rewatch the movie. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy. Except for the Scottish guy, like he's the only other memorable one. That's because he has like the most lines out of all of them. But aside from him, the rest of the mercenaries are just very kind of stock and very forgettable. And like I said, it turns into like a team operation, and just kind of. That kind of lacks kind of the Rambo feel of him just being on his own, being this one-man army waging this one-man war, you know? It's not that. Maybe they're worried because of like Stallone's age. Maybe they're like, do we really think we can have a 60-year-old one-man army running around? But the thing is, like, Stallone is in such good shape that like, yeah, I would have no problem with that whatsoever. Like, he totally sells it in this movie. He doesn't seem like an old man, you know, trying to be like his former self. He's just still like the badass, super strong, like Rambo, you know? There's the amazing moment in the movie where he rips the dude's throat out. You buy it. I'm not just sitting there like, oh, I don't believe that. I'm like, yeah, he could probably do that. Also, maybe the mercenaries might have been there to kind of appeal to a younger audience, to have more kind of like younger, more kind of badass soldiers. That's kind of also what it feels like a little bit. I don't know. I'm not saying the mercenaries are like that bad of a thing. I just feel like, I don't know, they weren't that interesting as they could have been. They at least could have given them more, like, better characters to make them like them a bit more, especially when it gets towards the end, when, like, some of them are captured and everything, to make us really kind of care more, but I really kind of don't, you know, because they're just kind of bland characters. Like, when you get to the climax of this movie, the climax of this movie is insanity, and this is what I mean with it kind of like embracing some of the like bigger like action elements of the other sequels, because it just turns into this huge battle between the Burmese soldiers, also like the other like rebels, and the mercenaries, and of course Rambo with this huge machine gun just mowing down people. And when he uses that gun, it's just ridiculous. People just get turned into like shreds of meat from that gun. It's insane. And that's really cool and all, and I really like that. That's a great action sequence. But part of me kind of wishes like Rambo like did a little bit more than just stand on that gun the whole time, because that's all he does for the climax. He just kind of stands upon that gun and just fires at the whole, like, ending. There's no scene in this movie where he's, like, you know, setting traps or, like, sneaking up on bad guys. I'm like, well, there is kind of, I guess, the throat-ripping guy. But aside from that guy, there's no, like, sequence of that, which is kind of like a staple of the Rambo franchise. There's always that scene of him, like, you know, hiding and being stealthy and then, you know, popping up and killing a guy or setting a trap for him. That doesn't happen in this movie. It's kind of missing that element. It's like a lot of the really cool kind of tactical Rambo elements are kind of missing from this movie, and I would have liked to see more of that. And like I mentioned, the CGI in this movie is pretty dodgy. You can tell that this wasn't like the hugest budgeted movie, which feels really weird, like after watching Rambo 3, which was a huge budget movie. This one, you could tell it was a little bit cheaper and they didn't have like all the money in the world, because there's some dodgy CGI like gunshots, there's some dodgy CGI death scenes of like the arrow going through people's faces where it just doesn't quite work. It's not awful, to be honest, because they were smart enough to have it go by really quick. so you don't really get to linger on it, because if they lingered on it, it would look really bad. But you can still tell that it's a little dodgy and, not quite there. There's also this CGI explosion that I totally forgot about until I rewatched the movie, and I was like, oh my god, that's right. Oh, and that looked awful. So there's some dodgy effects here and there that don't quite work at all. I love the ending of this movie, where after the big battle and everything, you see Rambo going home. You see him like walking down the street, kind of like the opening of First Blood, and you see him walking up to this mailbox that says Rambo on it. He looks up and he sees his ranch and just walks down the road into there as the credits roll. And for the longest time, I thought, and I still do actually, that that's the perfect ending to this series. Like, the series came full circle. The first movie began with him coming home, and the last movie ends with him coming home. It's perfect. But of course, you can't leave a perfect thing alone, because we have Rambo 5 coming out. So I'm really skeptical on that one, because I really love the ending of this one. I think it would have been the perfect ending to the franchise. Funny enough, when I first saw this movie, I didn't like it, like, at all. I don't know what it was. I watched it and I was like, no, this doesn't work for me. And then over time I came to appreciate it a bit more. Once I kind of got older and I was less thinking about like, oh, action and blowing stuff up, I kind of was realizing that this movie, like, tone-wise and story-wise, fits with First Blood a lot better than the other two films, and that kind of helped me kind of like grow my appreciation of it more as time went on. And so I do like this movie quite a bit, despite its flaws and stuff like that. There is one thing this movie is missing, but it's not its fault. It's something that, had to happen, of course, is, you have no Colonel Troutman, because in between films Richard Crenna passed away, and I think it was a smart move to just not have him in there instead of like trying to recast him or anything. But you do have that one cool montage, like dream sequence in the movie that kind of like pays tribute. You have like a lot of like audio and like video clips of Colonel Troutman, so he gets to appear in that.
So you're just gonna stay here forever?
John!
Though that montage is a very Sylvester Stallone thing, to have a montage to previous movies. He does that a lot in the Rocky films, so I found that funny that in the one that Rambo movie that he directed, he has a montage of previous movies. But I thought that was a really cool sequence though. I like how they actually utilized the deleted scene of Rambo dying from First Blood as part of the montage. Like, I thought that was really clever. And the villain in this movie, oh, you hate this guy. Like, you just want to see him die. Like, he's just this despicable, like, evil person. And so it's so satisfying when Rambo guts him at the end. Like, that moment is just a great cheer moment that you're just like, yes. So overall, Rambo is a very solid, entertaining, old-school action movie that's very brutal. Not for the faint of heart, definitely, but does have flaws. Like I said, dodgy effects, bland side characters, and not enough different cool things for Rambo to do in the movie. But those aside, it captures the tone of First Blood very well. It's the most true sequel to that one, and, is a very entertaining addition to the franchise. So, that's all I have to say for that. And I still got one more Rambo movie left. So until then, I'll talk to you guys later.